Hi again, welcome to this video where I will take a better look at this Zotac GeForce GTX 980 and in general how NVIDIA's GeForce GTX 980 still performs in games today. The GTX 980 is part of NVIDIA's second generation Maxwell architecture and was released back in 2014. We are 2022 now, that means that this model is now about 8 years old already. What we want to know is how this card performs in today's games and how does it compare to more recent cards on the market. The rest of the PC that I will be using to test this has an Intel Core i5 9500 and 16GB of RAM. Not the most spectacular specifications, but a pretty good match with this card if you ask me. Not too expensive, but offering decent performance. I did a more detailed video on how I built this PC, including some basic benchmarks. I'll put a card here and a link in the description if you're interested. We could go very deep into the technical details, but in the end, it's the experience today that counts. So I will try to keep it lightly. Let's start by trying out a few games and see how that goes. During the gameplay, I'll try to give you some more info about the card. Benchmarks went well, so let's see how this card performs in a real scenario. The first game that I will try here is Forza Horizon 5. This game is relatively new as it's less than a year old. I've always liked the graphics in these series, so curious to see how that goes. In terms of settings, I have this set to 1080p with everything on high. First impressions are pretty good, as we see that the frame rate is fixed pretty much at 60 FPS. Due to VSync, it doesn't go higher, but this is not bad at all. The graphics look really good as well. As you probably know by now, the GPU market, although getting slowly better, has been completely crazy for the last years, with cards that were never in stock and if they were, almost unpayable. Hence also one of the reasons why I even considered buying this card. Performance seems to be really good in this game. Definitely, considering this is a recent title. Even with lots of special weather effects and reflections, the frame rate was always a steady 60 frames per second. That's what I would call a decent start. Next one to try is Doom Eternal. This was released about 2 years back, which I still consider pretty recent. For this game, I again chose for 1080p with the following settings. At first glance, this is not disappointing either. Very fluent frame rate above 60 FPS. Let's play for a bit and see how well this goes.
The cleansing of Earth is a necessary step on the path to a brighter tomorrow.
The successor for the GTX 900 range are the very popular GeForce 10 series, starting really with the 1050, ranging up to the 1080 Ti. As far as I read and experienced myself, I think you can position this GTX 980 best a little above the GTX 1650 Super and below a 1070. In comparison with AMD Radeon cards, the GTX 980 will probably end somewhere between the RX 570 and RX 580. As we see here, also Doom Eternal is definitely more than playable. Frame rate never really drops below 60, even in busy moments with lots of things going on. GTA 5, which we will try now, is one of my favorites, which you probably have noticed if you watched a few of my videos. This game is already older and predates the GTX 980, which you can consider a high-end card at the time. In terms of settings, we can pretty much go all in here. As expected, performance is really good and the graphics, although this game is now considered old, still looks good to me. There are a few more things which are to consider if you plan to get this card. First one is the power consumption. A GTX 980 can in theory draw up to 165 watt, which we see it does in practice as well. In comparison, a GTX 1650 Super, which has similar performance, would only use around 100 watt. That's not only important for energy cost, but it also means you will need a power supply that can accommodate this. Well, I could go on and play GTA for a few more hours, but there is little to tell as everything goes smooth as butter with great frame rates. The next game that I will test is also coming from Rockstar, released at the end of 2018, Red Dead Redemption 2. It's known to be pretty hungry for system resources, so I expect this to perform less than what we had until now. Configured again for 1080p, far from the worst quality. The game runs fairly well. Frame rate seems to be around 30 to 40 FPS. One thing which you might have noticed is that the 4GB of RAM that my card has becomes a bit of a limitation. We could see this when configuring the settings. This would be another argument for getting a card of a newer generation, as they are more common with 6 or 8GB instead. As you can see, although the frame rate is not amazing, it's nothing too disturbing either and the game runs fairly well. I'm sure that by tweaking the settings a bit, we could still get better performance, as I opted for quality. For sure not a punishment to play like this. Next up is Cyberpunk. Another fairly recent game, which I will run with the following settings. As expected here, we don't see anything too spectacular as well, but I'm still impressed considering this card was already a quite long time on the market when Cyberpunk was released.
You have the manifest from the transport? Of course I do.
You could see that I again went for 1080p with medium to high settings. It's a bit of a trade-off between a better frame rate and slightly worse image quality. This depends a bit on the game and on personal preference, of course. The 4GB of RAM, but also the resources of the card in general, kind of limit you to 1080p. Full HD gaming still works pretty fine, as you can see. But if you plan to game on 1440p or 4K, then I would definitely suggest to look out for a newer card. Again, as with RDR2, Cyberpunk is very playable and quality looks good. As you can see, this game does push the card to the max, making it use over 150 to 160 watt at some times. The last game I will test is also from 2020, Microsoft Flight Simulator. The game is known to be resource hungry, but fortunately there is a lot we can tweak with the settings. Let's start this flight and see what this card is capable of. We seem to be getting around 40 to 45 FPS here, but that is for regular flying. As soon as you get lower and close to more busy areas like city centers, there is quite a drop in the frame rate. Let's say it's playable, but doesn't have much reserve. As you can see, this game as well pushes the card really to its limits. What I also did notice is that an additional 8GB of RAM here plays an important factor in this game's performance. I did try this earlier with only 8GB in total and it was much worse. I also do think that with a faster CPU it could still be a bit better. But in general we're reaching the limits of the GPU. As you could see, the general conclusion is that you could still have plenty of fun here. Also, as mentioned, if a high frame rate is more important to you, there is still enough room to lower the image quality a bit. That's more or less it for the video. To my ID, this card still has its place in 2022. Are there better options? For sure, but probably not for the price which you can find this card for. Should you buy it? That depends on what you expect and what your budget is. If you want to play semi-recent titles and plan to stay on 1080p for some time, which is still not bad, you can go for it. Thanks a lot for watching my video. I hope you have enjoyed this. I'd appreciate a like and feel free to subscribe if you want to see more of this. Thanks again and hope to see you back here soon.